The air buzzed with excitement as we lined up for the Marathon of Sand in Morocco. The crowd was electric, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I looked out over the vast expanse of the Sahara. Little did I know, this would become a fight for my life. The sun beat down mercilessly, and I could feel the heat rising from the sand beneath my feet as we took off, each runner vying for position in this legendary race. It was a test of endurance, pushing our bodies to the limit across 250 kilometers of unforgiving terrain. I had trained for this moment, but nothing could prepare me for what lay ahead. Hours into the race, the atmosphere shifted. A thick, oppressive stillness hung in the air, and I could feel a storm brewing on the horizon. My heart raced, but I shook it off. After all, this was just part of the experience, right? Well, that storm was about to change everything. The wind picked up suddenly, whipping through the desert with a ferocity I had never witnessed before. A massive sandstorm rolled in, swallowing everything in its path. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, and panic surged through the crowd as runners began to scatter, desperate to find shelter. I stumbled forward, blinded by the swirling grains of sand that clawed at my skin. The howling wind drowned out the sounds of my fellow competitors, and the once vibrant atmosphere of the race turned into chaos. It felt like the desert was alive, raging against us. I tried to find my footing, to stay close to the others, but it was impossible. I was lost. With each step, I felt the distance between me and the rest of the runners grow. It was as if the storm was conspiring to separate us. My heart pounded in my chest, and I fought to keep my breathing steady, knowing that panic would only make things worse. If I didn't stay calm, I would be swallowed whole by this relentless wilderness. After what felt like an eternity, the storm finally began to ease, but the damage had been done. I looked around, disoriented, and realized I was completely alone. My water supply was low, and the oppressive heat threatened to drain me. The vast desert stretched endlessly in all directions, an ocean of sand with no signs of life. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus. I knew I had to find my bearings. Little did I know that my next few days would test every ounce of strength and resolve I had. I began to walk, but each step felt heavier than the last as the sun beat down mercilessly. My throat felt parched, and my legs ached, but I pressed on, driven by a primal instinct to survive. The hours turned into a blur of desperation and exhaustion. I searched for landmarks, but everything looked the same, a vast, empty canvas of sand. At one point, I stumbled across an abandoned tent, remnants of a previous race. I scavenged what little I could find. A few snacks, a torn map, and a small water bottle, but it wasn't enough. I would have to ration my supplies carefully if I stood any chance of making it out alive. As the sun began to set, the temperature dropped dramatically, and I huddled against the tent for warmth. I closed my eyes, allowing my mind to wander. I thought of my family, my friends, and the life waiting for me back home. I couldn't let this be the end. I had to find my way back. Each day felt like an eternity. I trudged through the sand, searching for signs of life, for a way out. I felt the sun's heat during the day and the cold bite of the desert at night. I fought against the elements, battling exhaustion and despair with every passing hour. On the second day, the sun rose to greet me, but instead of warmth, it felt like a relentless enemy. My water supply dwindled, and the snacks I had scavenged barely held off the gnawing hunger. I knew I had to keep moving, but each step felt like a monumental task. I began to feel the effects of dehydration. My lips cracked and bled under the sun's relentless gaze, and my throat felt like sandpaper. I longed for a drop of water, but I knew I couldn't waste what little I had left. I forced myself to remember the race's training. Stay calm, keep moving, and trust your instincts. My next few days would spell absolute hell. On the third day, exhaustion hung heavy on my shoulders. I'd barely eaten, and my body was beginning to feel the strain. I trudged onward, the landscape unchanged, a flat expanse of sand stretching endlessly around me. My mind began to play tricks. I saw mirages dancing on the horizon, and I could almost taste the cool water they promised. Little did I know that my body was beginning to shut down. The sun was relentless, and I struggled to maintain my focus. I felt myself becoming weaker, each step more laborious than the last. I tried to stay alert, but my eyelids grew heavy. The desire to lay down and surrender was overwhelming. As I moved, I began to create a mental map of my surroundings, marking the landmarks I could find. Dunes that looked like waves frozen in time, rocks jutting out of the ground like ancient sentinels. My brain was clinging to these markers, desperate for something familiar to hold on to. It was like a game of survival, and I needed to win. As I stumbled through the endless dunes, delirious from thirst and exhaustion, I began to think I would never be found. My thoughts became a haze of desperation. My lips were cracked beyond repair, and my muscles had long since given up, screaming for mercy. I was barely conscious, walking purely out of instinct. Every step felt like a fight against an invisible force trying to pull me into the sand. Little did I know, a nomadic Tuareg tribe, those who wander these merciless lands for generations, had spotted me from a distance. As I crawled up yet another unforgiving dune, I saw them, figures blurred by the heat and exhaustion. At first I thought it was another cruel mirage, but as they came closer, I heard voices, real voices. The Tuareg approached cautiously, likely wondering what a lost soul like me was doing in their endless desert. They offered water, and the moment the first drop hit my lips, it was like life itself being poured back into my veins. I couldn't speak, I could barely lift my hands, but the tribe knew what I needed most. They carried me to their camp, which was a simple gathering of tents, a stark contrast to the endless nothingness I'd been engulfed in. I was too weak to do anything but accept their help. They fed me, gave me more water, and even though I had long stopped believing in rescue, I knew I had been saved. In the tent, they spoke in a language I couldn't understand. My thoughts were still too scattered to comprehend much, but I understood kindness when I felt it. These people had saved my life, even though I was a stranger in their world. They bandaged my feet, burnt by the hot sand, and rubbed healing oils into my skin, which had blistered and peeled under the relentless sun. For the first time in days, I slept. I slept without fear, without hunger gnawing at me. But even in that sleep, my body was so broken that I couldn't fully rest. I would awaken every now and then, only to see one of the tribe members watching over me, offering more water. The tribe knew the desert better than anyone. They understood the cruelty of the sands and the unforgiving nature of this land. In their care, I regained enough strength to speak. When I was finally able to explain who I was and how I had ended up lost in the desert, their eyes widened in understanding. They knew the Marathon des Sables. Everyone in this region did. After a few days of recovery, the Tuareg helped me make my way to a nearby Algerian military outpost, where the true weight of what had happened to me began to sink in. I had survived for 9 grueling days in one of the harshest environments on Earth. The soldiers at the outpost were stunned to see me. News had already spread of the missing marathon runner presumed dead after the sandstorm. I could hardly believe that I had been the subject of such a search. When I finally looked at myself in a mirror, I saw the skeletal reflection of a man who had come face to face with death and somehow won. I had lost over 30 kilograms during the ordeal, and my body was so frail that even standing for too long was a challenge. I was taken to a hospital where they treated my wounds and monitored me closely. Physically, I would recover in time, but the mental toll, the scars left by the desert, those would take much longer to heal. As I lay in the hospital bed, I reflected on the madness of it all, the hallucinations, the moments I came close to giving up, and how my survival had depended on a mix of luck, sheer willpower, and the grace of strangers. I thought back to the days I spent lost in the Sahara, my mind teetering on the edge of collapse, and how that final moment, meeting the Tuareg tribe, had saved my life. Little did I know then that my story would become a tale of survival known around the world. To some, it was just another extreme tale of endurance, but to me it was a personal victory, a testament to the human spirit's will to survive, even in the most hopeless of situations. Returning home wasn't easy. My body was emaciated, and my mind was clouded by memories of the desert. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still hear the howling wind, feel the sand against my skin, and taste the desperation of survival. Friends and family greeted me with tears and disbelief, but only I truly knew the depths of that experience. No one could fully understand what it felt like to be so close to death and yet hold on. Despite the trauma, I returned to running. The desert hadn't broken my spirit. It had only made me stronger. I began speaking about my experience, hoping to inspire others to push past their limits and never give up, no matter how dire the circumstances seemed.